We're going to begin now Sichah, Parshas Miketz, part of the project of Likkutei Sichos. This Sichah is in volume 20, Chelek Chaf, page 192. First Sichah. Fascinating Sichah as always. Let us begin, let us explore the Rebbe's vision on a part of the Parsha. Aleph, Eifim Pasuk al Yosef Yulad Shnei Vanim B'terem Tovei Shnei Harav. In regards to the Pasuk, this week's Parsha, the Pasuk says, the two sons were born to Yosef when? Before the year of famine came. Now, Zogt Rashi B'Perusha from Gemara. Rashi brings down from the Gemara in Tainus, Mikan she'asal Adam l'shamish mitasi b'shnei oven. From here we learn that during the years of famine, a person is forbidden to have marital relations. That's why the Pasuk stresses that Yosef had these children, B'terem Tovei Shnei Harav. Why does the Torah say that he had it before the year of famine came? To stress that in the year of famine, during the years of famine, a person is forbidden to have marital relations. Frek Tesus, so Tesus in Tainus Yud Aleph Amid Aleph asks, Yechevet is doch geboren bein hachemes, when Yankov bewonnen seine angekommen came Mitzrayim. Was Eise ha'eis, Eise Rovayas. Tesus asks a gewaltige Shaila. Yechevet was born between the walls during Yaakov and his family's arrival in Mitzrayim, when it was a time of famine. So, v'azay came in Zagan as Levi Avi Yechevet had overgiven Oifan Isser Chas v'Sham. So the question is, how can we say that Levi, who is Yechevet's father, violated an Isser? God forbid. We're saying that Yosef didn't have children. Yosef had his children before the famine came. Why? Because from here we learn that a person is not allowed to have marital relations during the famine. But Yechevet was born ben Achemes, which means that Levi had relations during Shnei Harav. So if Levi had relations during Shnei Harav, he was over an Isser of Mishamash Mitasi. That's Tesus' question. Similarly, the Mefarshim ask, the Pasuk says that Abimelech saw Yitzchak jesting, and Rashi says he saw him having marital relations. He says doch dan given ara abaretz, and Yitzchak at that time it was a time of famine in the land. So are you allowed to have relations? Or not allowed to have relationships during famine? You see, Yosef did not have relations in the famine. He had the children beforehand. But Yechevet was born b'shnei harav. Yitzchak and Rivka had relations mamish b'shnei harav. Okay, so now we have a few answers, and the Rebbe is going to slug up these three answers. So the commentaries discussed this matter at length and resolved the questions in various ways, and here are some of the answers. Aleph. The first answer is that it's not an actual prohibition, it's not an actual isser, nor blois amidas chasidus. It's an act of acting pious. Yitzchak and Levi are not given nizer in the midas chassidus, and Yitzchak and Levi were not careful in this midas chassidus. Other as far as does not given is usher, or that before the giving of the Torah, intimacy during a famine was not usher. And Ridaya from Yosef is blaze and asmachta, and this proof based on Yosef is only as a support because it's only midrabanan. So that's the first answer. You see that Yosef refrained from marital relations. That was a midas chassidus. Alpidin, one doesn't have to. Or before Matan Torah, it wasn't an isser, and the raya from Yosef is only an asmachta. Base. Das was eine chasuche banim, but hat noch nicht mekayim gewen mitzvahs peri v'rivya, Yitzchak v'Levi, and yenem zman oder belel tefillah is by zeh nitadem isser. The second answer is the isser does not apply to somebody who's childless. Did not fulfill the mitzvah of peri v'rivya. So Yitzchak and Levi at that time, or let's say the night of mikveh, there's no isser. In that status. And Gimel, the isser is nerve and Yisrael shruyim b'tzar. The third answer is that the isser only applies when Jewish people are suffering from tsar, from adversity. When their far is nit given kein isser by Yitzchak und Levi, hayes as Yaakov bei seine nit given shruyim b'tzar. Now, the isser does not apply to Yitzchak and Levi. Why? Because since Yaakov and his sons, they were not suffering. They had grain at that time. Und das, was Yosef hat sich abgehalten, ist, weil hat nicht gewusst, als haben Tvua und hat gemeint, als sind an Stuhl bezahlt. Now, Yosef refrained from relations because he was unaware that his father and his brothers still had grain. So Yosef believed that they were suffering from tsar. In other words, like this. In fact, this answers, the Rebbe is going to slug it up, but it comes out like this. The Isser, what's the Isser of Mitosah B'Shnei Ra'oin is when Yidden are shrein b'tzar. The Yidden were not shrein b'tzar over here. Why? Because they had tfuah. Yosef also had tfuah. So why was it Yosef? Because he thought his siblings didn't have tfuah, so therefore he refrained because he thought that they were suffering from adversity. Now, the Rebbe, these three answers again, either it's midas chassidus, so Yitzchak and Levi were not mekayim mitzvahs chassidus, midas chassidus, or it was before Ma'an Torah. Number two, the Isser does not apply to people who didn't have children, or B'leil Tefillah, mikveh night. Or number three, Yisrael Shriim B'tzar, the Yidden over here were not Shriim B'tzar, so therefore they were able to have relations. Yosef thought they might not have Tfuah, so therefore he was concerned about his family. Now, the Rebbe says, in light of this discussion, something very perplexing emerges from Rashi. This is why doesn't Rashi address the difficulties mentioned above concerning Yitzchak and Levi's conduct? It's a very pashta shaila. Warum? Die Shaila ist now stellt sich euch und nimmt ab der Pshat. These questions arise when learning pashta pshat. Oy vayashkev Amelech is Rashi mefarish ro mishamish mitasi. On the pasuk Avimelech gaze, Rashi does say Yitzchak saw that they were having marital relations. Or Rashi zog beferish as demot is given nit nor arav baretz nor shnas and oven. Rashi says that explicitly that it wasn't just a famine in the land, but it was a year of famine. All over. It was all over. Was das is given in the Shneis Harav Kim Befurish Batera. And similarly, Rashi says that Yecheva was born between the walls, and this took place during the years of famine, as the Torah says explicitly. Now, so Rashi says clearly that these concepts happened. This happened This happened in the years of famine. Not only the year of famine, or the land was in a state of famine, but it was a year of famine. Now, Miketz sagen as Rashi farlos sich auf einem. Now, you cannot say that Rashi relies on one of the three answers that we just gave. For in race of the verschiedene Schwierigkeiten, was ein da in jeden von die Tirutzim shein kana mokem nachbem. In addition to the various questions that we have concerning these solutions, is the selbe shaila in ze alle. Sie sind klal afil nit nemers in Pirush Rashi. The Rebbe says the fact is that Rashi alludes to none of these suggestions that the commentaries give a solution. Wie gerät kampamim hat Rashi geschrieben sein Pirush al-Teira in asignen as eiche ben chamesh. Der Mikro soll kennen verstehen kavanas Rashi von seine gezählte Wörter. Now, we discussed many times Rashi's commentary in such a way is that a 5-year-old who studies Mikra would be able to discern that's what Rashi comes to tell us what to answer all the Ben Chamash the Mikra. Nit darfendig zuchin kenes of his birazeh. And the Ben Chamash the Mikra does not need to go ahead and find additional explanations. Everything can be found in Rashi. Now, from them was Rashi zokt dostam, from the fact that here Rashi, without qualification, says on kene chilukim mitnoim, without any exceptions, and not even subject to any conditions. Aser la'adam l'shamish mitasi b'shnei oven. Rashi says clearly it's forbidden for a person to have marital relations during the years of famine. Is muchach as aleph. Thus is an isser kipshuti. So therefore, it comes out from Rashi. It's clear that it's a isser. It's a prohibition. Number two, the isser is for alamin on unterschied. Oich fahren Yosef far mantera und far chsuchi banim b'leil tefilase. This isser applies to everyone without exception, as it also applied to Yosef who lived before the giving of the Torah, and it applies to those who are childless and the night of mikveh. And number three, says nit verbunden darf mit dem Zar von Yidden nor oib It's not dependent on the Jewish people experiencing adversity specifically. Rather, as long as the world is going through years of famine, marital relations are usher. And the reason why the Rebbe slugs up these answers, doesn't get into it, is because the fact is, Rashi does not. We want to understand that Ben Chamish the Mikra has a simple question. I just learned in the previous Parshas that Yitzchak and Levi, Yecheved, was born b'shnei ha'oven. Yet Rashi here says, Mikan she'asher adam l'shamish mitasi b'shnas ha'oven. And yet Rashi doesn't even address this question. Okay, Gimel. Another perplexing point of Rashi's explanation is as follows. Rashi zog mikan she'asher adam. Rashi says here, from here we learn that a person is forbidden. As dem Isra learned up from dem pasuk, meaning that this prohibition is derived from this pasuk. Von Adgashas Rashi mikan is moving as Rashi will shelo sein at zweiten Ort von wann man wollte lechere gekent uplearn dem Isra. But von Rashi as the limit is mikan dafka. Why does Rashi have to say, emphasizes from here, which is mashma, that I could think that somewhere else I learned this out? So Rashi tells us, no, mikan, this is the makir that I learned that marital relations are also during Shnas Oven. Gefit ben takin der Shamli Medrash, as zusammen mit Limud Anal von Yosef, werden Arog gebracht, den Pasuk, was steht bei Neachin, uvasal ateva ato, v'necha v'ishtach, v'necha itoch, von welchem lernt ab von, as, meknisas ateva, nesa leitashim sharmita. Now, in Talmud Yerushalmi, the Jerusalem Talmud, and in the Medrash, and in addition to deriving the Isser, from Yosef's conduct, the Chachamim say, concerning Neach, it says, you shall enter the Teva, you, your sons, your wife, and your sons' wives with you. And we learn from here, so what do we learn from here? We learn from here that we learn that once Neach entered the Teva, it was forbidden to engage in marital relations. Seemingly, this is the same prohibition that is enforced during the years of famine. As in Azman was the Welt is shruye betzar, is when also betashish shamita, which comes out that when the world is suffering from adversity, marital relations are forbidden. So now, what's the question? It's quite perplexing. Rashi Atzmai in sein Pirish al Ateda sagt as Neach is given also the Shamish Mitasabi Knisas Teva. Why? Rashi says clearly that it was prohibited for Neach to have relations when he entered the Teva because the world was suffering from tsar, from adversity. Hi, wie sagt Rashi, mikan sha'asr as das lernt man areis, dafke mikan, b'shas as mikan das ablernen, von dem Pasuk frier bei Neach. So why does Rashi say we learn from where? From Yosef. That a person is forbidden is learned specifically from here, when the same lesson could have been learned from earlier concerning Neach. It says the Neach that the pasuk clearly says. Rashi says the pasuk says uvasa el hateva. You should go into the teva. You, your sons, your wife, and then the wives of your sons. And Rashi says clearly that when Neach came into the teva, asur b'tashmish shamita. Why? Because the olam shtuya b'tzar. So why is Rashi saying that we learn it out from Yosef? We learn it out from Neach already. Okay, so now the explanation is as follows. The explanation is the Rebbe says the difficulty itself serves as the basis of the solution. What does that mean? But in Zulegen Loshna Gemara, dem Wort Mikan, mach Rashi klar as da zal derach abschad nit derselbe Isser wie bei Neach. While da is klar und da jeden tam ha'olam shtuya b'tzar. By adding from here, Mikan. So, in other words, from here, which does not appear in the Gemara, Rashi tells us that according to Pshat, the Isser here is not the same Isser that is applied to Neach. Why? Because in our Parsha, this that the world is Bitzar is not met. It's a different, right. What does that mean? Ha'olam shtuya b'tzar by Mabel meant the Welt bechlal. When you say the world was suffering from tzar, from adversity during Mabel, refers to the world. V'adaram nit mention. So it refers to the world in general, and not only people. Chayis, welche man kann nicht sagen, als sie seinen Dämmelt gewinnt Shtui B'tzar. Sie sind alle nicht bemitzias, Commission Emar, Vayimech Kol Yikum. Now, when you say the world was suffering from Tsar during the Mabul, refers not to people and animals, but to the world in general. And on the contrary, people and animals couldn't have been said that they're suffering from Tsar because they all ceased to exist. As it says, he wiped out all existence. So that the Shavia Metzius, that people were suffering from Tsar, or Ha'olim Shtui B'tzar, doesn't mean that people or animals were suffering from Tsar, because there was no people and there was no animals. Vayimech Kol Yikum. What?
The world was in a state of Tsar. The world itself.
Oh, so Oim Mizom Mefarer sein, as das meint min die von Olam, welche seinen Nitzel geworden beteva, was der sein dort in an Eifen von Shtui B'tzar, sein doch näher gewonnen von Shem B'chalalam euch Shtui B'tzar. Now, if we interpret the case to apply to the inhabitants of the world who were spared, in other words, those people in the Teva, and to live in the Teva was considered B'tzar, the Neach, his sons, and their wives were included amongst those who were suffering from Tsar. Onit wieder Isra Nilmit. As Atzol Rei mentions, seine B'tzar in andere darf sich euch bestattet sein in sein Tsar. Now, what's the problem with this? So, if we're going to say that Shtui B'tzar means the inhabitants of the world, which means the people who were spared from the Mabul, which is Neach's sons, and their wives who were included amongst who were suffering from Tsar, and this would be inconsistent with the Isser learned from the Pasuk in our Parsha, which teaches us that on account of a number of majority people suffering from Tsar, others are obligated to take part in their Tsar. Right? Und nicht wie die Vemela kämen von dem nicht ablernen, als bei Schnee oder Oven ist dann Isser auf die, was leiden nicht von kein Rav. So it's impossible to learn from Neach's conduct that during the years of famine, those who are not suffering from famine, we need to be done by Yosef, such as in our case Yosef, was ihm hat nicht ausgefällt kein Tfur. Yosef was not lacking from any Tfur. So what are we saying? We're saying that, what's the Rebbe's question? Let's learn that there's an Isser of Tashra Shamita by Shnei Oven by Neach. By Neach, what? Because that's the first time. What? Okay, so that's another. Why the Rebbe doesn't bring this out, I don't know. But let's say that Shtui B'tzar means, you can't say Shtui B'tzar means the people, because there's no people, there's no animals. So what are you going to say? Shtui B'tzar are the people that are in the Teva. So let's say that's considered Shtui B'tzar. So it comes out that they were the ones who were Shtui B'tzar. Now, what are we learning from Yosef? Yosef had the children before Shnas Ha'Ovun, right? B'terem Tovi Shnas Ha'Ov. Why? Because Eretz Gemeint, he thought that his. So what do we learn from him? Mikan she'osulot mishamish mitasim shnei Oven. Now, why was he Shtui B'tzar? By him good, because he thought his siblings didn't have. So it's not equal. It's not the same. It's where you're learning it out. In other words, Yosef's case and the Neach's case is two separate. Neach, it's about them Shtui B'tzar. Yosef is about the other person Shtui B'tzar. Okay, hey. Yeah, so this will be clarified by first prefacing, where you bring this analysis of Rashi's nuanced wording. What does it say? It's forbidden to have relations. What's the key word? B'shnei de'oven, during years of famine. Seemingly, emes taka, as das is the Lashon Gemara. True, this is the wording of the Gemara. Aber Rashi is doch da oisen zu abteichen dem Pasuk. As I feel nit mit zayin, as their Pirush is from the Gemara. Now, true, this is the wording of the Gemara. However, Rashi's purpose in his commentary is to explain the simple pshat of the Pasuk. And Rashi doesn't even indicate that there's a source of the Gemara over here. Hat nit gedarf mishana zayin, nor zogen aser b'shnas re'oven. So Rashi should have not deviated from the wording of the Pasuk, which the Pasuk says before the years of famine came, which what does the pasuk say? Rashi should have said it's forbidden during a year of famine. Rashi says, "Osel adam l'shamish mitasi b'shnei oven," which means that it's forbidden to have relations during years of famine. Now, this is Take, the Lashon of the Gemara. But Rashi doesn't mitzay in the Gemara. So Rashi shouldn't say the what does Rashi say? Rashi says b'shnei oven. Right? Which means during the years of famine. Now, l'chayra, what's the pasuk say? Shnas ha'ra'ov, which is during a year of famine.
And not
years.
And not shnei oven?
Yeah, Rashi's mishana from the pasuk. Yeah, b'shnei oven means years of famine. And a year of famine, 1 year.
Shnei means year, shnas means in general?
Shnas ha'ra'ov means during a year of famine.
Shnei means years.
Yeah. Okay, ubefratas is da chilik b'pashtus. Now, the Rebbe says, Rashi's wording is there's a big chilik. Shnas ha'ra'ov, that's what he says. Shnas ha'ra'ov meant as dem yor is da ha'ra'ov. When you say the year of famine means that this particular year, that there is a year of famine. When you say years of famine, which is Lashon Rabbi, which is plural, meant, what does that mean? As das is amatzev vos tzitzich hameshech zman. This indicates that the famine lasts for some time. Now, since nitna achilek in oirech hazman tzider rov dert blois ein yor oder mer, nor makim leimar as is achilek in echos. Now, the difference between these terms isn't only regarding the duration, whether the famine, let's say, lasted 1 year or longer. There's a reason to say that there's a qualitative difference between them. What's the qualitative difference between them? Wenn azach passiert einmal yor can sein as das is nor vorbei passieren. Now, when something happens once in a singular year, it's likely that it's a passing phenomenon. Schenken wenn das chazet sich über mehrmal man sagt as das is shnei oven is satkufa von rav. Nit kein zufelliker inyan nor adavar shel chazaka. Now, if you say when something happened once, it's a one-time phenomenon. It's a passing phenomenon. When it repeats itself many more times, and people refer to it as a year of famine, it becomes a time of famine. Not something. It's not something which is incidental. It's something that becomes chazak. It's established. Aderech v'Rashi at Shloimy farish given as Yehuda had meri gehad von pen yamas gam hu shelek ha'ochav val muchzekes hi shiamusu. This is similar to Rashi's explanation. He says that Yehuda was afraid to let Sheila also die like the brothers because it has been established about Tamar that she kills her husbands. So likewise in our case as well. Oibs is nor ashnas hara'ov ein yor. Is a chiddush. I saw nid gevus kein tvua. The gevaks kein tvua. Es ist ähnlich alle chiddushi. Das ist davar aray umechedish l'shaita. Now, if you say, if it says it's a year of famine, so it's 1 year, so that's something out of the ordinary took place. No grain grew. So this is considered something which is unusual. It's temporary. It's time limited. So durch so something which is it's unusual circumstances. Now, durch zu flicke sibes von dem Jahr, zufällige sibes von dem Jahr, was haben Gehen given as it was on its wachsen. So it's something which is it's not the normal circumstances. A b'shas das is shnei oven is das a beweis auf a hemshich a ganze tkufa an hogam yuchedes der Eibishter bringt a tkufa von Rabbi. Now, but if you say the famine was described as years of famine, this point is to extend periods of unusual. It's unusual that Hashem brought famine into the world. Und das ist der Tam b'pshutei shel mikra von dem Isser der Shamash mitase b'shnei der Oven for dem welche is nit berov of mela nit shor b'tzar. Now, for this reason, according to Pshat, during the years of famine, a person who doesn't suffer from famine and he's not basically subject to tsar is also from engaging in relationships. Why? Well, in azman for shnei der Oven, because this is a time of years of famine. When the anhagah mamaila is nit an anoifen von kol me'or zera v'kotzer le'ishbeisu nor hebech yeshuvu shel elam hanit kein ort so sich eisig sein in pruruvu milos ort yeshuvu shel elam. So basically, what comes out when the world is in a period of years of famine during which Hashem's conduct does not follow the typical nature of, as the Torah says, that all the days of the earth there's seed times, there's harvest, it didn't cease. Instead, this is a time of not settling of the world. Right, so that's why it's also for a person to occupy himself with pur revu. Why? Because it's not a one-time thing, or it's a right. How do you say tufelig in English? Not typical. Right. Right, but so there's a difference between the year or when the world is in a stage of Shnei Oven. When the Anhagah L'Maila is opposite the way the Eibishter set up the world. What?